Okay, good morning. I'm Melania Alvarez.
I'm James Quintana.
I'm Anthony Vicencio.
And I'm Ezra Mansell.
And our research question was the effects of major sporting events on host cities. So we looked through the lenses of historical, social, environmental, and economic. So the major sporting events, what are they? Major sporting events are large international or national competitions that attract millions of viewers and thousands of visitors. They include athletes, fans, media, sponsors, making them the most watched events. Host cities want to host the events because of the tourism they bring, the people they bring, the amount of money they bring, and they also get to build infrastructures which add to their cost, which makes their cities way better. Host cities want to hold these events because of the economic and social benefits. However, hosting also comes with challenges that host cities tend to ignore because when they are chosen to be able to host, they have to plan in such short amount of time. Historically, we have seen time and time again that these issues have not made them disappear. When they ignore them, it doesn't just disappear and go nowhere. Like, it ends up coming back, but in the end. For example, in Beijing, they hosted the Olympics in 2008, and this is a picture of the infrastructure that has been left graffiti. No one's using it. It's basically just there just to be there because they didn't plan ahead on what to use it for, and now it's just there. And if they don't have enough money to keep it running, then it's just not going to be used. Another example of what we have seen is during Formula One. In the environmental, there's stuff that's left off by the tires that goes into the air, which can be very dangerous to breathe in, which leads to health effects. So overall, historically, we have seen that there are so many issues, and the solution to seeing all these issues is to be able to use their past mistakes to grow and not do what they have done. So, yeah.
All right. And then the two major social problems that arise when hosting the Olympics would be forced evictions and displacement of local communities and residents, and also homelessness and gentrification, which leads to affordable housing crisis and just unaffordable housing prices for local communities to come back to. An example is that during the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics, around 70,000 residents were displaced from their communities without any financial compensation, and the government was able to displace these residents because they said that it was due to social pleasing and to please the public needs, which is a way of them to just force these evictions without any repercussions on the government end, which is then leading into a human rights issues. And then also because of the gentrification that goes on in these local areas, it then leads to increased housing prices. So then these residents that were forced from their homes oftentimes can't even go back to the places they lived, and it leads them to becoming homeless. And then, and then solutions for these would be the FIFA and the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, can introduce financial penalties to cities that don't abide by human rights contracts. And then they can also implement human rights. They can mandate human rights clauses by implementing these in the bidding process, which allows the host cities and nations to prepare and allow for better use of housing and just infrastructure plans, which would lead to these unnecessary forced evictions and displacement to be canceled or like lowered. And yeah.
All right, and then environmentally, major sporting events can bolster environmental sustainability. However, more times than not, they harm host cities through air pollution, waste generation, and also white elephant structures. So beginning, major sporting events significantly increase air pollution in host cities due to construction, transportation, and tourism. Several studies indicate an increase in air pollution linked to major sporting events, such as the 2004 Rally World Championships, the 2010 Commonwealth Games, and the Australian Formula One Grand Prix. In Germany, transportation was responsible for more than 90% of all CO2 emissions generated by sporting events in 2005. Another key contributor to pollution is the construction of the infrastructure, which effects range from immediate local pollution to global climate change. Major sporting events can also bring about massive quantities of waste from single-use packages, food packaging, and merchandise. Specifically, during the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa, each person generated an estimated total of 1.8 kilograms of waste per day, and stadiums in Cape Town alone produced over 600 tons of waste, a good portion of which would go unrecycled. And then lastly, white elephant structures, which refers to infrastructure that was built for a sporting venue, but is then underutilized or abandoned. These have massive effects on the environment. According to Ariana Wilson from the University of Nebraska, one of the biggest problems that lead to white elephant infrastructure is overplanning and demand of the short-term span of the Olympics. And then the Tokyo examples of environmental solutions during the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics. It demonstrated a sustainable approach to urban development, but most notably the introduction of a power system that features a hydrogen-generated electricity, waste minimization during the FIFA World Cup, included waste avoidance and reduction through eco-conscious planning.
Okay, so here are the three economic effects. So it's long-term debt, white elephant structures, and inflation for the locals. So an example of long-term debt would be the 2012 British Olympics in London. So their budget was $9.3 billion. They actually went over budget and they spent $14 billion, and this caused them to go into a little bit of a debt. Number two, white elephant structures. So in 2016, the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, most of their $12 billion projects were underused after the games, and they just were abandoned completely. And this caused them to lose a lot of money on these structures that they built, and because they were abandoned, they weren't being used. And then the third one is inflation and higher prices for locals. So oftentimes what happens in these games is business owners will see the massive influx of tourism coming in and restaurant owners, and they'll bump up their prices because they're like, oh, all these people are coming in, we're just going to bump up our prices, we'll make a lot of money. And this hurts the locals because, you know, things like transportation goes up, grocery stores. In the 2010 South African World Cup, inflation was documented based on the locals. They said that during the World Cup, the groceries were higher. It was harder to get transportation like buses or trains. It was more expensive. Everything was just more expensive based on the games. And then three economic solutions that were provided. So to combat the debt that the UK was experiencing, they did something called long-term urban regeneration. Now what that did was they made these Olympic facilities into different things so they could get money. They made them into parks, business offices, and in schools. And what that did was they didn't want a short-term boost of economy. They didn't want to solve their debt in a short-term amount of time. They wanted to do it in a long-term amount of time so they could still utilize everything and still be gaining that money that they lost over time. And then the second one is, so what the 2016 Rio de Janeiro did to kind of combat the white elephants was they took a page out of the book that London did, and they did the same thing. So their white elephant structures were actually, they were repurposed into schools and athletic training facilities. And once again, instead of losing all this money that they were, since the white elephants were abandoned, they were gaining money because they were renting out the structures to athletic teams, and they were letting schools kind of be built in these structures so that they would gain that money back and they wouldn't be white elephants. And then to combat the inflation that the 2010 South African World Cup was experiencing, they actually went on a budget during the World Cup. So they said no new construction during this time and just no new projects. They basically said they just wanted to focus on the Olympics so that, because if they were building other things and doing other projects, they'd have to raise the inflation more, and they didn't want to do that. So during the World Cup, they were just like, no new construction projects, hold off on all construction, and this kind of, the inflation was still there, but it caused it to be at a lower amount than what it could have been if they were still letting everything go. And then thank you for listening to our presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then you guys stand all in a row so I can ask you guys a question. All right, James. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem your group identified?
I think the one with the greatest impact was Ezra. He really put his time and effort into looking at different sources and just overall looking at the problem and the research question. I think he had the best understanding out of all of us because he was able to kind of help us all understand the problem better and understand our research so that we would all be kind of in line with him.
Thank you. Anthony, how did the group decide to include Ezra's perspective, lens, or conclusion into the overall presentation?
So we decided, for me personally, I was able to use his lens because environmentally there are social issues because communities are often facing like the pollution issues and like the plastic and overuse. These communities often face their issues, and then we can see that historically we can go back and look at how environmental issues from past Olympics affected communities, local residents, and these host nations. And then economically, the prices, how like the damage of these environmental issues cost cities and then leads to more debt or more just financial problems that these nations have to deal with.
Fantastic, thank you. Melania, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about one of your other teammates' findings, and you can select whichever teammate you want.
I was able to, in my essay at least, I talked mostly about like how the environmental and how that has like been a big part, just because the environment is something that's like we only have one of, so we must take care of it. So to learn on how to like take care of it out of past mistakes is really important, and that furthered my research and everything else.
Ezra, what is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
I think overall, seeing the solutions from like economic side and also especially historical, because that kind of views all of the lenses, it helped me see similarities in the solutions that like the environmental side has done. And yeah, just pretty much seeing similarities between all of them. It hasn't really changed my understanding, but it's just shown me that like a lot of these issues have the same solutions.
That's a great job, you guys. Thank you so much.